Hello and aloha, everyone. My name is Sergeant First Class Sim. I'm with the Army's Honolulu Medical Recruiting Team. I got the honor and privilege of introducing our special guest, Dr. David Flick, and I want to read off his bio so that you know a little bit more about him before getting started. Dr. Flick graduated magna cum laude from Loyola Marymount University of Los Angeles, California, with a BS in biology, where he was heavily involved in high school and university level tutoring. He then moved to Chiang Mai, Thailand, where he worked as a high school mathematics teacher at an international baccalaureate school. In the 2 years prior to starting medical school, he volunteered in 7 different countries throughout Asia with international medical aid programs. Dr. Flick attended medical school at UC Irvine after receiving the Army Health Profession Scholarship. He served on the admissions committee for 4 years, including working on the selection committee board. He completed a family medicine residency program in Oahu, Hawaii, and served on the residency admissions committee. He is board certified in family medicine and now works as a flight surgeon for the U.S. Army. He also has a website called medschoolcoach.com where he helps students get into medical school, and I'm sure Dr. Flick can tell you more about that. So Dr. Flick, welcome. Thank you for doing this, sir.
Thanks for the intro. So let me, I'll turn on my camera so you guys can see me, and then hopefully we'll get my slides pulled up here. Sorry, Sim, tell me if, once we get this rolling, if presentation, picture, if this all looks good to you. Does that look good?
It looks good, sir. Video and PowerPoint. Looks
All
good.
right, look at me go. All right, so hey, thanks for the introduction. I'm going to give talk just a little bit about some of the updates on the stuff I do. I know I wear a lot of hats. Hopefully you guys will forgive me. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna throw on my Hawaiian shirt. It's 8 o'clock my time in Colorado. I'm like, hey, I'm not putting on like a suit and tie for tonight. So we're gonna talk kind of broadly, like a 30,000-foot overview of getting into medical school, and then we'll open it up to discussion. This is gonna be pretty informal. I'm gonna go through the slides relatively quickly because if you're a student or you're a recruiter, you probably get blasted with PowerPoint way too much. So this is informal. I don't know, based on my setup, sorry, I didn't log in with the app, if I can see hands raised. But Sergeant Sim, just interrupt me if anybody like throws up their hand or has a question. So you guys got the introduction. I wear a ton of different hats. So yeah, I work for a company called Med School Coach as a professional pre-medical student advisor. Also advise medical students getting into residency. Used to be the residency admissions director there. Now I just kind of do stuff a little bit behind the leadership role. In my Army role, I'm a reservist as a flight surgeon. In my civilian world, I'm a family medicine doctor. I work at Kaiser. I also am a faculty at UC Denver in Colorado, where I live now. So yeah, that's enough about me. But yeah, I've been working in the kind of professional admission space for a long time. Been through HPSP myself, so I kind of have a lot of different roles that I balance, but happy to work with applicants about, paying for medical school, getting into medical school, medicine in general, any of that stuff. So depending on where you're at, I'm just going to kind of roll you through the whole application cycle, and we're going to start with some kind of cynical bad news up front. So the rough, hard truth, or bottom line up front, as the Army likes to say, is that 60% of applicants don't get into medical school every year. The statistics remain relatively the same year to year, or at least over the past 5 years, but the numerator increases every single year. So last cycle, we had 55,000 applicants, 22,000 of those matriculated. And so I think it's really helpful to know where you stand just kind of jumping into this process. And then my goal to work with people is basically how to get you from that 60% and into the 40% that get accepted. And by the way, as you see these slides, I work for Med School Coach, but I'm not here to talk about the company. I'm not here to promote the company. And if you work with a recruiter and get directed with me, that's a free service that I do through the Army, okay? What I did link on the bottom, all these slides, is Prospective Doctor. Prospective Doctor is a free resource with a lot of good information about getting into medical school. So I recommend you use it. It's a great resource for your application. So how do these people go? How do these 40% of applicants actually get into medical school? It's not too complicated. Getting it done is a lot of work, but basically you need to prepare and plan in advance about your application. We'll talk about that. Got to put together a great application. I'm not going to go into exquisite detail about this, but give you kind of the lay of the land. It's impossible for me to overemphasize the importance of applying early. We'll talk more about that as well too, but you got to apply early. Most people are kind of familiar with the primary application. That's putting your application together, sending it out to all schools out there. Excuse me. Once you get hit, once that primary hits the school, you're going to get hit back with a secondary application. We'll talk about prepping those. Then you got to interview like a boss. And then you get yourself your acceptance. So let's kind of walk through the whole timeline, because applying to medical school is not a sprint, it's a marathon, it's a full year-long process. So in the middle of the screen, you're going to see where the application actually goes out. But just take a second to kind of get the lay of this slide for a second while I take a sip of my water. And then we're going to start where we're at right now in basically the January-April timeframe. And I'm going to walk you through what you should be focused on as you go through each part of this whole application cycle. So take a second to take a look at that for a little bit. Okay. So if you're looking to apply to medical school this cycle, which is May, June for matriculation in the following fall, that would be 2024 of the fall, yes, future. Right now is the time to be preparing your primary application, requesting letters of recommendation. If you haven't taken the MCAT already, you should be taking it, and we'll talk more about MCAT timeline. And you should be kind of building your whole primary application, getting everything ready. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the important aspects here, okay? Remember, kind of 30,000 foot overview for today. So one of the hardest parts about prepping your primary application, which is the main block of information you're sending out to all medical schools through a centralized service, AMCAS for MD schools, AA-COMAS for DO schools, TMD SAS if you're applying to Texas, because Texas has got to be special. That personal statement you're going to do for all these applications, it's a huge block of space, and it takes a lot, maybe the bulk of the creative effort and time you're going to spend on your application. Get it done early. If you're applying this cycle, you should be working on it now. If you're applying next cycle, you should work on it now anyways, okay? You can't start on this thing too soon. The average client that I work with takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months to complete their personal statement. So it's easy to do okay, hard to do really well. You need to get this thing edited, okay? You can work with a professional service. You can work with a friend. You can work with your school. You can work with me if you'd like through HPSP, through the recruiters. Just have somebody give you an objective opinion here, okay? Quality is more important than quantity. You can see the characters below for each of these personal statements, roughly around 5,300 characters. To me, what I'll tell applicants is that shoot for about a page and a paragraph. So that ends up somewhere between 4,800 to 5,000 characters. You got to keep in mind that admissions committee members are reading essay after essay after essay. If you can get the job done in less characters, that's a huge benefit to yourself, okay? Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about the personal statement for now. Again, any of the stuff we talk about today, I am more than happy to kind of delve into deeper, and we can spend a whole hour on future webinars or even in person in the future, kind of delving into this stuff. So I'm going to go kind of quick here. Before I move on to the secondary applications, let me just briefly touch on the other stuff that you saw about maybe the January, April timeframe, okay? MCAT, when should you take your MCAT? I recommend for most people, if you're going to be applying in the May timeframe, the latest you should take that MCAT roughly around January, February. Why? The reason is if, God forbid, you bomb that MCAT, you're going to get at least a couple more months to kind of get your feet under you, re-prepare for the MCAT, retake it, and be ready for that May, June. So let's say you take it in January, you bomb it. Okay, look, you just probably spent a couple months studying for it, didn't end up well. You at least got February, March to restudy for it, maybe in April, retake in May, and it's your scores back in June. You can still apply early. Now compare that to a lot of applicants that wait till around April, May, June to take their MCAT because they say, well, shoot, I'm applying in May, June, I'm gonna take my MCAT around there. If you don't do well on it, let's say you get a bad score, and we'll talk about kind of goal score. Let's just say your goal score for MD schools, the average matriculant across nationwide is about 511, 512, okay? So let's say you score 505, well below average for MD applicants, not looking like you're gonna have a big shot for MD schools. Well, shoot, now it's May and you got your score. If you wanted to retake it, you'll need June, July, August to study for it. Take it in August, score back in September. Now we're way late on the application. So even if you do tremendous on that score on the second round, you're way too late to be applying. So hopefully you can appreciate that timeline there. Now these are just general rules of thumb. Everybody is unique. If you got questions about that, definitely let me know. I think that's what I'll say about the MCAT. Let's talk about those secondary applications. So once you put together your primary application, personal statement, summary of your activities, your transcripts, your letters of recommendation, you send that off, boom, you get hit with a bunch of secondary applications. The good news is your friends over there at Prospective Doctor have a full database of all secondary applications across the United States, okay? MD schools, DO schools, Texas schools, they're all there. Now, they do change slightly from year to year, or sometimes they don't change at all. Either way, I guarantee, let's say you're doing John Hopkins secondary application. The questions you're answering there, let's say that they change those questions around. I guarantee you'll find those questions on another secondary. So it's not a waste at all to pre-prepare your secondary applications. Speaking of John Hopkins, they've got probably the longest secondary out there. It's about 7 pages worth of essays. And so these are not small applications to work on. Some secondaries are a couple of questions. John Hopkins is 7 pages. So you're going to have to prepare these in advance so that you can boom, 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 just send them back off to the school. Because as soon as you got your secondaries in, it's time to move on to the interview phase. Take a look at the slide here. These are some common questions that you'll find on secondaries. I highlighted this one on here. Sergeant First Class Mina out there probably heard me give this presentation before. I always like to give this story just to emphasize how important your secondary application is. So when I was working in admissions, we had an applicant that we felt was a pretty good match for our school, and as reviewing his final application, there was a question on our secondary about describe a challenge you've overcome. The applicant's answer to this question was about training his German Shepherd. And I'll admit he did a good job writing the essay, but at the end of the day, this is an application to medical school, and if the greatest challenge this applicant had was training his dog, we all had a big concern about whether he's going to be able to handle the rigors of medical school and medicine, given that we're actually holding lives in our hands. And so this applicant didn't get accepted just based on not just this question alone, but it was a big factor on it. So it's really important to kind of understand that every single question in your application, even the smaller ones during your secondaries, they actually hold quite a bit of weight in your final application. One other piece, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but another piece of your secondary application, so after primary is done, secondary application essays, is CASPER, okay? There's what CASPER stands for. I'm not going to read the slides to you. It's an online test that basically looks at behavioral components of your own personality. So kind of a subjective look at you like a pre-interview based to kind of pair with your application. There's now more than just CASPER. I think it's called Atlas or Altus Suite. And it's a series of these exams. Every school, some of them require some of them don't. Each year, more and more schools are requesting you to do more of these exams. So I just recommend that you do all of them. It's another hoop to jump through. It's more money to pay for. I know it kind of sucks, but it's the best way so that you don't have to apply around schools. Do everything so that you can look at every school. This is not like studying for the MCAT. Check out YouTube videos, check out blog posts for this, check out the website for CASPER, and that should be plenty enough to kind of prepare you. And I've got that on my next slide here so that I can take a drink. So yeah, just take a look at the materials on the website. Take a look at Prospective Doctor, other resources.
Dr. Flick, are you meaning to turn off your slides?
Did they disappear?
It did, sir.
Just now?
Just about 5 minutes ago.
Can you see this?
We cannot.
Thanks for letting me know.
No problem.
Let's
Thought you meant to
see.
do that. Sorry. Would have mentioned it earlier.
No worries. Let's see what happened here. Thanks for letting me know. All right, boom. I don't know what happened. The good news is, I swear, I didn't even touch the computer. Is it back?
It's back, sir. Thanks.
Boom.
Thank
All
you.
right. So the good news is, I promise you my slides are not that exciting. You didn't miss anything. So, hey, just interrupt if they disappear again. I don't know what happened there, but okay. So enough about Casper. Let's get back to our main page here. So we've done our primary application. We've done our secondary application. Hooray, it's time for interviews. So if you prepared your application in advance and you're on top of your timeline, you could be looking at interviews as soon as September. I just realized on my slide that it says September to April. That is true. Okay, the September is when first interviews get rolled out. Technically, we think of kind of like the interview season as September, October, November, December, but I mean they extend well into the spring of the following year. We're still in April right now. I still have clients that are interviewing at medical schools. They could go as late as May. Usually not as late as June, but it is basically as long as they go. Most of the spots are going to fill up fast. It's a first come, first serve admissions process. That's called rolling admissions. So the goal is to get your foot in the door as soon as possible, okay? Interviews, okay. A lot of you out there, so pre-meds, may or may not have much experience in interviewing, right? You may be interviewed to go to college, and then you just hung out in college and did classes. Some of you guys have jobs, some of you don't. And so if you don't have a job, if you haven't been through a couple of interviews, you really, really want to practice this, okay? I don't care who you practice with. Practice with your dog, practice with the mirror, practice with your mom and dad. You know who's a great person to practice with is your recruiters. And so all the recruiters out there, what we call non-commissioned officers, these guys have been training younger soldiers to prepare for promotion boards quite often. These are a great resource to just ask your recruiter, hey, could we run through some questions? I can send you questions. And so recruiters ask me, I'll feed you guys some questions. Just read the questions off to the applicants and you guys could give them feedback on professionalism, things like that. You just want to get your nerves out and go through this, okay? So that's all I got for you in terms of slides. And so I just want to kind of give you a quick and dirty, big overview of that whole application timeline. And then I'll open it up. I'm not sure how many applicants we got out there right now. I think it's a pretty small group. But just as a summary, really just focus on, the biggest piece of the puzzle for that primary application is your personal statement. Get some feedback on that. Send it to your recruiter. They'll pass it off to me. Happy to take a look at it and give you some honest feedback there. Work with somebody on it. You need to submit on time. That means preparing your application before the season opens. Right now, work on it tonight. And then when May and June rolls around, you're just copy pasting into the application, click and go, submitting your fees, and off you go. Prep those secondary applications. As soon as you're done working on your primary, start working on your secondaries. As soon as you're done with your secondary, start that interview preparations. You should always be a step ahead of that. Get the Casper stuff done and then rock that interview, and hopefully you guys will have a fantastic cycle. So let me close out of this. Let's stop this sharing, and I'll mean it this time. Questions, concerns, anybody out there, thoughts, anything?
Well, hey, sir, it's Sergeant Sim. What about gap years? Do you what would you say about gap years?
Yeah, great question, and your applicants will definitely answer this. So yeah, recruiters, I encourage you guys to chime in as well too. You guys have a lot of feedback with what your applicants are asking you. Yeah, I'm like the king of gap years, and so like in that intro, yeah, I forgot, you probably got that off my thing for med school coach. Yeah, I took the MCAT when I was still in college. I liked my score and I was like, cool, I think I'm good to go. But I didn't want to go right to school. So I was living in Los Angeles. I looked at a globe and found the opposite point and I was like, oh, Thailand, that sounds interesting. I booked a one-way trip to Thailand and found a job out there and taught at a school for a year. So yeah, gap years can be fantastic. I certainly enjoyed mine. I learned a ton from mine. They can be very helpful. The average age for a medical student now is around 24, so it's not usually straight out of college. Usually there's some time in between. So build some professionalism, build some life experience, go have some fun before you settle down into school. You just need to make sure that your gap year is productive, okay? So your gap year kind of order of operations should be: number one, do I have gaps in my application that I need to fill? Are you missing research? Are you missing clinical experience? Are you missing leadership, community service? Are you missing, are your grades not too hot? What's your MCAT look like? If there's any gaps in your application there that you need to improve, your gap year should primarily be focused on fixing those. Once you got all that squared away, ask yourself, hey, could I kind of expand my worldview a little bit? If you're a guy like me that grew up in kind of a little Los Angeles bubble, hey, go explore a little bit if you're feeling adventurous. I think that'd be helpful. Hey, if you want to go make a little extra money before you start medical school, hey, knock yourself out with that. Just make sure you're being productive. The only wrong way to spend a gap year is playing video games for a year and a half. So just be cognizant of the fact that when you show up for your interview, the first question they're going to ask you is, hey, what have you been doing since you graduated college? And you don't want to sit there being like, working on my tan and hanging out at my parents' house. So yeah, the gap years can be fantastic. It's kind of nuanced based on the applicant, but definitely go for it if you need it or if you want to. It won't hurt you.
Great, sir. And is there a magic number when how many schools you want to apply to
Mhm.
improve your chances?
Yeah, this is another good question too. So when I talk to applicants, especially this time of year, I'm looking back at their application from the prior year, and maybe they don't have any acceptances. And my job is to pick apart their application, see what was the problem. First place I'll look is, well, MCAT and GPA, and then how many schools did you apply to? So many applicants apply to too few schools for a couple of reasons. One, they don't know how many to apply to. Two, it's expensive, and I get that. Although I'll just kind of say up front, you need to invest in this, okay? Because if you don't apply to enough schools the first time based on trying to save money and you have to do it again, you're doubling your cost. So do it right the first time, apply broadly. Number three, some students get cocky. I work with applicants with a 520 MCAT and a 4.0, and they've got published research. If you don't apply to enough schools, you're not casting a wide enough net. So for the kind of the majority of applicants I work with, I'm recommending somewhere between 20 to 30 MD schools and 5 to 10 DO school backups. And that probably sounds like a lot to just about any applicant. But again, cast a wide net, do it right. At the end of the day, you're always going to want to have more than enough choices rather than kicking yourself, I should have applied to more schools. So keep that number in mind, roughly 20 to 30 MD, 5 to 10 DO schools. And so that's kind of your baseline. Let's say like MCAT and GPA are hot. Hey, maybe that we're talking about maybe like 20, 25 MD, 5 DO backups, maybe no DO backups. If you're looking at an applicant with like 500, 505 on the MCAT, okay, that's predominantly DO schools, maybe like 20 DO schools, 5 to 10 MD schools. So you kind of shift that back and forth based on the applicant's kind of criteria.
Okay, and I know during the the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, when they were starting to interview again, they were doing a lot of virtual interviews. Do
Mhm.
you know if a lot of schools are still or just went back to face, or if they're still doing a hybrid, a combination of both?
Hybrid is right, is still there's a lot of virtual options for you. If you can go be in person, that is to your advantage every single time. There's a personal component. You get to visit the school and see what it's like. You get to meet people, which can be very helpful. There's a lot that's lost over Zoom. So if you have the opportunity, you can go. I do recommend, the good news is that a Zoom interview is more difficult. And so if you practice over Zoom, you'll be well prepared for the in-person interview. So a virtual kind of practice is good practice. If you are going to do a virtual interview and you only practice in person, I would recommend doing virtual. There's some etiquette to how to set up your computer, how to interact with the screen. how to, one tip I'll give people is don't use a chair like mine that's swiveling, because if you get nervous, you start wiggling around. So lots to learn just about the etiquette of doing something over video, but you should be prepared for both.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions out there? Go ahead, Tae Yang Shin. Did you unmute your mic there?
I see you got unmuted, but didn't hear anything. Still nothing. Sorry.
If you're having trouble with your mic, you can try typing something in, typing your question in the chat, if that chat box is up and running now.
Hello?
Woohoo!
Yes, we can hear you now.
So, if your majority of your university years was in the pandemic years, and you weren't able to get a lot of extracurriculars, do you recommend a gap year or
That's a
not?
good question. Maybe is that just keep in mind too is that you are sitting in a pool of applicants just like yourself, okay? And so yeah, if the bulk of your education was during COVID and your opportunities were limited, well, so is everybody else's, right? So it's a relatively equal playing field. There will be some people with more and some people with less. It really depends on how big that gap and how glaring it is. If you've got no volunteer experience, you're not ready to apply. And so spending some extra time working on that would be helpful. The only thing I would tell you that you can absolutely go ahead without is research, okay? And so if you didn't pull any research, don't take a gap year just to kind of plus up the research. It's very important for a lot of schools, but not for everyone. And so you can get into plenty of schools without any rigorous research. You're just not going to have a shot at research schools, UCSF, Mayo, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale. So research-oriented institutions are going to want that, but everybody else is fine. So yeah, it kind of depends on what you're missing. Another one to kind of spend some time on, if you have no shadowing, you need to get some shadowing. And so you have to have some kind of exposure to the healthcare field and have a meaningful answer to why you want to go into medicine firsthand. So it kind of depends on what you're missing. If you're kind of low on everything, you can probably go through with it. It's kind of individual. The other thing too is keep in mind you can make up for some things, right? So as long as you got something in every category, hey, we'll just work real hard on that GPA and MCAT, and maybe you can kind of overcome it. Make sense?
Yeah. And one more question.
Yeah.
So, if let's say you graduated you graduated a year ago and you want letters of recommendation, but you haven't kept in touch with your professors.
Mhm.
Is there like any way to get those science recommendation letters and the non-science ones?
Yeah. Is this a hypothetical or are you in that situation?
I'm in that situation.
Yeah, no worries. All right. So yeah, you're not alone as well too. And so yeah, for letters of recommendation, the quick and dirty answer is you need 2 science letters, 1 non-science letter, bare minimum. Okay. Now, if you spend significant time outside of school, 2, 3 years, those letters are not that important. It's really helpful to understand the reason for those letters. As a college applicant, who can vouch for your professionalism, your work ethic, uh, and your personality, all these things. You don't have a job, you don't have a supervisor. And so we lean on your professors. And for pre-meds, that's majority of science, right? So you can get around this, right? Is that, if you've been outside of school for a while and you've been working, well, get a letter from a physician or from somebody that you're working under. That's an okay avenue for it. The thing you got to be aware of too is that the schools use algorithms to sort your application, and they're going to sort through. If they don't see the 2 science, 1 non-science, you may get skipped over on a first round. Somebody will look at your application, but you might kind of miss out on that kind of once over as they look through real quick. So just for example, too, when I'm screening applications on an admissions committee, I'll just kind of scroll through the application real quick. Look at the GPA, look at the MCAT, leadership, community service, shadowing, I'll just kind of breeze through this stuff. And if they meet that first pass, I'm like, cool, now let me focus a little deeper. So having the 2 science and 1 non-science can be really helpful to get past that first screen. You know what I mean?
Okay, so is it okay if we have like 2 science, but then we substitute the non-science with a character letter of recommendation from someone
Don't
else?
love the character letter. Most schools don't want to hear from friends, family, church, stuff like that. If you can't get something out of science, I'd rather you just get, another science letter or something else, or just skip it. I wouldn't use the character reference though. They're just
Okay,
unreliable, right? Anybody that you ask for a character reference, they're going to write you a decent letter, so it doesn't really help in this case. Good question.
okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other ones?
Thank you for your question, Tae Young. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask a question? I know Miss Choi is joining us from South Korea.
What? Send us a question out there from South Korea, please.
Yeah, thanks for the brief. Really appreciate it. Um, so my question was, it's been a while since I graduated. It's been like 6 years. And then some of the courses requires like courses to be taken within like 5 years. But do you know any schools that don't require that? Or is it like majority of the schools that require?
Good question. I wouldn't apply around it. It depends on your performance as well too. If you had a good performance 6 years ago, I wouldn't give it a second thought. Just go ahead and apply. It's really important to understand that the schools put these rules together, but individual admissions committee members don't know this, okay? So I'm not going to be reviewing your application as a committee member and be like going carefully through your transcript like, oh, that was 6 years ago. Oh, that was 5.5 years ago. If your performance is bad, I'm going to pay attention to it and kind of nitpick, and that's going to be a problem. But if you did okay in undergrad 6 years ago, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd go ahead and apply. Now, if you didn't do well, this is time to remake your application. You would benefit from a post back. You'd benefit from a master's or even a special medical master's, which is a whole nother topic. But yeah, if just kind of like straight up, let's say the rest of your application's ready, you did well in undergrad, who cares, 6 years ago, MCAT looks awesome. Yeah, go ahead and apply. I wouldn't think twice about it. Lots of career changers do that.
I see. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Is it okay if I could ask about the HSPS scholarship?
Yes, please. Yeah,
So,
the military folks here are going to give more information directly, but yeah, happy to kind of give you my perspective as well.
okay, so um, I was thinking of becoming a officer before I go into medical school. So is that a way to, am I still eligible for the scholarship for medical school if I become an officer before going into medical school? Or is that not a good route to take?
It depends on your goals. Now, if you want to go from officer into HPSP, you can. And there's nothing holding you back, nothing except your commander and your unit. So I will tell you is that people that are active duty in the military and they're trying to then go to medical school through HPSP, you need to basically get permission to leave your duty to go on and do this. I've never met anybody that got this offer declined, but who knows where you're going to be, who you're serving under at the time. And so you just have to know that it is not fully at your leisure to do this, as you have to
Okay.
get permission to do it. So in that respect, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't become an officer or you should become an officer. If that's something that you're interested in doing before going to medical school, by all means. And if that's kind of where you'd like to kind of navigate your career, that's fine. I think it's important to understand that becoming an officer first and then going to HPSP does not give you any advantage. Okay, so if your primary goal is to go to medical school, that's not going to help you, and at worst, it may hinder you. Not necessarily, but it creates some risk there. But yeah, just being an officer, you certainly can take the HPSP scholarship.
Okay. Thank you. And also, is there like a time frame where we have to like apply for the HPSP scholarship?
Yeah, and the recruiters will talk to you a little bit more about timeline. I usually tell applicants, just keep in mind, HPSP is a competitive scholarship, okay? And so if you're interested in the scholarship, just start working with your recruiter right away. Do the paperwork, get everything done. None of that binds you to anything. And so get the paperwork done, get everything squared away up front, and then you need a letter of acceptance to actually get through and get awarded HPSP. So once you've got your letter of acceptance, hopefully you've had more time to think about HPSP. You can interact with me, with your recruiters, gather information. If you still want to go through with it, you're all set. Go ahead, you can move forward. As soon as you have that letter of acceptance in hand, you're good to go. But what you don't want to do is say, well, I'll get to it later. I'll get my letter of acceptance and then I'll consider it. Because who knows when you're going to get that letter. You might get it early and there's still scholarships available. You might get it late, and by the time you made up your mind, the scholarship is gone for that year. And then you're in a really weird position of trying to start medical school, incurring debt, and then thinking about taking it on in second or third year medical school, which it gets complicated. So bottom line, and hopefully like recruiters like to hear this as well too, yeah, get started up front, get it all done when you can, because you can always change your mind and make up your decision later, but you just don't want to get stuck in that scenario.
So it would be wise to start now with the medical admissions
Yeah,
cycle.
yeah. If you're applying this coming cycle, start interacting with your recruiter now. Lots of paperwork and application stuff to get through. Yeah, it's not really that difficult to do. Your recruiter will help you out with all that, but it takes time, right? And so start working on that now.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Those are good questions, Taeyong. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to our second part of the brief, which would be me presenting about the HPSP scholarship? Okay. Okay, great. Do you have anything else to add, sir, before we continue on to the next portion?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. First, thanks for setting this up, having me on here. Happy to talk with you guys. Recruiters out there, if you guys haven't worked with me before, please consider me your point of contact for any questions that either you have about the application process or your applicants do. So if you have an applicant who's wondering, what do I do about my application, send their contact to me. I will reach out to them and get back with you. If you got applicants that want to know about HPSP, I'll talk them through my experience and give them a fair shake of things. So whether it's admissions to medical school, getting that letter of acceptance in hand, talking about HPSP, I also work with applicants for, I think it's called MD SSP while they're in medical school, can talk about active duty reserve, stuff like that. So yeah, please utilize me as much as possible. There's not, you can't ask me any question too big or too small. And then to the applicants out there, thanks for asking questions tonight. After the brief that you get from the recruiters here about the details of the scholarship, if you'd like to talk to me further about what it kind of practically means to go through that scholarship, I'm happy to give you my personal experience. Just connect with your recruiter. They'll share my contact with you.
Thank you so much for offering your services and your time. We really appreciate it, sir. So with that being said, we'll move on to the second portion of the brief. Okay, so hello again. Like I said, my name is Sergeant First Class Sim. I'm U.S. Army healthcare recruiter, and I've been a recruiter. I've been doing this job since 2014. I started off in Boston, where I was there for 6 years, where I was extremely happy with Boston because it's a beautiful city, and I wouldn't mind retiring there. The Army really wanted to punish me, so they sent me here to Hawaii since 2020. I did move though in the middle of the pandemic. And but it's okay though, because they put me in a hotel room in downtown Waikiki. And oops, excuse me, where all expenses were paid for a whole month. So I want to get an admin note out of the way before this briefing. I want this to be an informal discussion, just like Tae Young. If you have any questions, or if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to, you know, unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your questions. Okay. This brief is for you, and if you have any questions during the during what I'm saying to you, then it's best to go ahead and ask at that moment. Otherwise, you can save it for the end, and so just let me know. So what is the Army Health Profession Scholarship? The Health Profession Scholarship program is one of the most comprehensive scholarships available in the healthcare field, covering your full tuition for an advanced medical degree while also providing you with a monthly stipend. Who's eligible for the HPSP? So you'll need to be a U.S. citizen. You'll need to be enrolled, accepted, or applying to an accredited graduate program, meaning medical schools in the United States or Puerto Rico. So no island schools from the Caribbeans. You're going to maintain full-time student status during the entire length of the program, qualify as a commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserves. What that means is you got to be physically fit or physically qualified, medically qualified, and also morally. And I will also cover what the pay will look like in the next 3 slides. The minimum requirements is that your undergraduate GPA has to be a 3.2 or higher. The MCAT score, 500 or higher, with at least 124 in each of the 4 categories. If you have taken the MCAT more than once, then we will use your latest scores. So some of the benefits of receiving the Army HPSP is you'll have 100% tuition paid to the medical school you will be attending. You get reimbursement for your books, laboratory equipment, and academic fees. Sign-on bonus of $20,000. You get a monthly stipend of $2,600 for 10.5 months. You get full officer's pay during the 1.5 months, which is usually in the summer. And currently for students in Hawaii, we go off the zip code of the school. So you get housing allowance during your officer's pay for that 1.5 months. And it comes to a total of a little bit over 10,000. And you receive that as you attend training or you rotate through your Army residencies during school. And I just found this out from one of our 4th year students who just matched into general surgery here at in Hawaii. She says the Army can pay for up to 2 months long, a 2-month long away rotation, which does include travel, housing, rental car, and food. And civilians have to pay out of pocket if they want to do away rotations, which could cost a good chunk of money. So those are some of the benefits there. So you might ask, am I required to do boot camp? Am I, gonna bunk with 30 other individuals Am I going to get yelled at by a drill sergeant? Well, there are two types of training if you've never served before or if you're not currently serving. The first one is called the direct commissioning course. It's 4 weeks long in San Antonio, Texas. You know what I just realized? I've been reading off of the slide after. So let me go back. Okay. The direct commissioning course is 4 weeks long and is in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. You learn the basics of how to be a soldier. You're put in officer quarters where you have your own room, but you share a common area. This is a watered down version of boot camp or basic training where you will be attending it with other healthcare professionals. The reason for this is individuals like myself, enlisted members, most of them are straight out of high school. They're in their, 18, 19, some even 17 years old. So they break them down and they build them back up. But essentially for a professional or someone who is on a professional track, mainly they want to make sure that you know how to wear the uniform, know the basic lingo of what it means to be a soldier. The second part of that is called the Basic Officer Leadership Course. It's 6 weeks long. It's in San Antonio, Texas. And you'll be staying in a hotel on base. You'll be paid for the 45 days. And by the way, you'll want to get DCC out of the way before school begins, just like Dr. Flick mentioned. You want to apply as soon as you can. You don't have to wait for a letter of acceptance. That way, if you apply, you get accepted, you do end up accepting the scholarship, you'll be in the system already so that you can have a school date for DCC, for a direct commissioning course, before school even starts. That's a nice chunk of pay before school starts, and it's highly recommended. So let's talk about the Army residency. Facts about Army residency. Compared to the civilian side, in the Army, there is a 85% match rate into your top two choices at an Army residency. As a matter of fact, the two HPSP recipients who just matched into their residency here at JAPSIM, they both matched into their first choice, and they're staying here in Hawaii. The Army has 12 training hospitals, 72 residencies, 74 fellowships. I mean, we have a lot of beds, a lot of positions, a lot of residency positions, and so that's the reason why it's a lot higher when it comes to matching into the residency of your choice. While you're in residency, you get full captain's pay, which here at Tripler, it comes out to around $110,000. So probably one of the best reasons to do the Army HPSP is because of the high probability of you matching into the residency of your choice. You have worked hard to get into medical school, so why not improve your chances of matching into the specialty that you really want? And during Army residency, like I said, you'll get captain's pay. And I just posing a question. You don't have to answer, but does anybody know what the national average resident receives for residency pay? For pay as a resident?
Wouldn't it be like around 60 to 70,000?
Right. It's definitely $55,000 to $65,000. That's around the national average. It's probably gone up a little bit because of inflation, but you are correct. Versus the Army, you get full captain's pay with benefits, and if you are married at the time, your family is 100% medically insured with dental, and you're also covered with life insurance as well. We don't touch you while you're in residency. You train to be a resident, and that's all you're going to do for the most part, and pass your boards. As a matter of fact, it's a 96 first-time board, specialty board pass rate, and it's a 100% first-time board pass rate in 13 different specialties. And so that's us tooting our own horn. But one of those 13 specialties is general surgery. So you do have time to study, and we're knocking out some pretty smart residents. Just to give you a brief overview of what the direct commissioning course looks like, it's you get to play Army, right? For 4 weeks, you get paid, you wear the uniform, you march, you're in formation, but it's basically a taste of what is to come of being in the Army. As you can see on the slides, those are some of the topics you're going to be learning about and conducting. So the obligation, what do you owe the Army after? So your payback will be a minimum of 4 years or the length of your residency, whichever is longer. And it's going to be at one of our Army hospitals or clinics, working in your specialty. Like I said, you'll receive full captain salary and incentives that are comparable to the civilian market in your specialty. And so, like I said, the payback is going to be 4 years. So if you attend a family medicine residency, I believe that's 3 years, you'll pay back the Army 4 years. If you're doing a general surgery residency, which is usually 5 years, you'll pay back the Army 5 years after residency. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Any questions on this? All right. So when can I apply? So the best time to apply would be once you've taken your MCAT, you meet the requirements, and you also don't have to wait for a letter of acceptance to start your application. Once you've taken your MCAT, put in your medical school applications, contact the recruiter, and we can start your application process. And if you don't get accepted that year, which after this brief by Dr. Flick, you should be in a better position for sure during the medical school application process. But in the case you don't, you can reapply again next year for the HPSP scholarship when you again put in your applications to medical school. Okay, so one of the requirements for the application is a commissioning physical. And that consists of labs, vision, hearing, your medical history as well. And if you're a applicant here in Hawaii, we'll take you to Tripler. It's a 2-phase physical. Phase 1, it's labs, vision, hearing, medical history. And then phase 2, where you'll be meeting with the physician, where they'll go over your medical history, and that completes your physical. However, if you have any medical conditions that, like let's say a broken pinky or a broken arm from a few years ago, we'll need some medical notes, and then we'll submit the waiver. 99% of the time, it should be okay. It should be cleared. The waiver should be approved, as long as there aren't any current complications that would limit you from participating in being on active duty. So back to the DCC for a second, for the direct commissioning course, the Army Combat Fitness Test. You're going to be conducting that during DCC. However, it's not for record, meaning it won't count against you if you don't, pass. It's just to familiarize yourself, and if you pass, great. And then it's when you do your basic officer leadership course, that's when you're actually going to be doing a record Army Combat Fitness Test. And you can look up videos on YouTube where the Army has posted actual exercises and what the ACFT actually consists of. Okay, so it's a quick brief. And so in summary, by going through the HPSP route, you will be living a more comfortable route, you'll be living more comfortably, potentially, than your classmates during medical school. You will have a higher chance of matching into the residency of your choice compared to the data we receive from the National Residency Matching Program, the NRMP. You will receive better pay in residency, and you will only owe about 4 years to the Army after residency. Are there any questions?
About the about the service payback for the military. So just to clarify, it's whichever's longer instead of like the addition. So for example, um if medical school is 4 years, but then residency is like 4 years, payback's not 8 years, but instead 4 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Active duty payback would be 4 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
And does that count towards the services required for the minimum pension that you can be eligible as an officer?
So the pension with the new blended retirement system, uh, it's normally 20 years and you receive your pension.
Mhm.
However, with the new blended retirement system, you have the option. It's sort of like a 401k. We call it the TSP, Thrift Savings Plan. It's where after a couple of years, you'll be able to contribute to that TSP, where the Army will match up to 5% of what you put in. That way, if you decide to get out before the 20 years, then you will at least leave with something. If you do decide to stay in the full 20 years, then you will get a pension. It works a little bit differently, and it also depends on how much you have contributed to the TSP while you were in. There's a
Okay.
whole calculation, and I'd be happy to, go over that with you as well.
Okay. So does the service active service duty payback for the residency or medical school, does that count in towards the 20 years required for the pension?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was your
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
So the time during residency, I don't know if you can help me out here, Dr. Flick, but the time during residency usually does not count towards your 20-year retirement unless you join the reserves. If you join the reserves, if you join the reserves after getting off of active duty from HPSP, the time spent in residency will count towards your retirement years. And we have a hand raised. Go ahead, Sergeant Sturgill.
Yeah. So to answer your question, during residency, that time isn't going to necessarily count towards your pension. Just like Sergeant Smith just added, if you were doing, let's say, the STRAT program, which is an Army Reserve program, right, where you're actively in the Army Reserves while attending residency, yes, like that time, that reserve time would count towards that your good years in the reserves is what they call it, towards the 20-year pension. However, due to that residency time, like, yes, you technically are active duty getting paid. However, that time, uh, because you're still in school, you're not actively, you know, providing services to service members as a physician. That time does not count until once you graduate residency and you report to your first duty station. That is when that time will start counting towards your pension. Hopefully
Okay.
that kind of cleared it up.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Sergeant Sturgill. Yeah, that's perfect.
You're welcome.
So yeah, so the best time to apply is once you've taken the MCAT, once you apply to your medical schools. Like Dr. Flick said, like I mentioned, the school is the medical schools are accepting virtual interviews. However, the face-to-face interviews are usually best, but if you are opting to go half and half or use the hybrid option, it is probably more economical, because you wouldn't be spending so much money on you know, going and doing a face-to-face interview across the country, especially if you're here in Hawaii.
Hey, sorry, Sam. One quick question, and I may have just had missed it, but did you mention the HPSP accessions bonus at all?
You know what? I might have skipped over that. I was having trouble with these slides. Yeah. So the thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the sessions bonus, you get a $20,000 bonus for just joining. It's a sign-on bonus, and it's taxable. However, it's $20,000 start off, and if you apply for the HPSP early enough, you're able to get in and do DCC, direct commissioning course. That's the 45 days of second lieutenant pay, and so yeah, you'll be starting school off on a good footing.
So is HPSP for like all military branches? So like Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine. Is it like for all those military branches? Yeah.
Yeah, so your question is, are there HPSP scholarships for the other branches? Yes, there are. There are us, Army, Navy, and then Air Force. Marine falls under the Navy, so they would be Navy. So there's two other branches that would be the Navy, that would be the Air Force. They're all our sister services, and they all have their part to play. We, of course, we are the largest of the three branches that offers the HPSP scholarship, and so that's why I mentioned that we have the most hospital beds, training positions. And so if you are trying to specialize, like let's say in general surgery, emergency medicine, the higher chances would be, statistically, would be in the Army.
Okay. And is there like a quantifiable amount of scholarships available for HPSP?
There is a set number every year. It's a little bit over 250 per year. And so there's a HPSP selection board that starts in the new fiscal year, which starts in October. And there is usually an HPSP scholarship almost every month. So I believe it's 11 months out of the year, there is an HPSP selection board. And so with every continuous month, there's going to be less and less scholarships. There's going to be more, it gets more and more competitive, as you may imagine. And so I definitely recommend you applying early.
And is this based on rolling admissions too?
Yes, all the way up until September, it's going to be our very last board. So let's say for October of 2023, our new fiscal year starts, fiscal year 24, and it goes all the way until September of 2024. There'll be an actual board. So we'll if you don't get that letter of acceptance, I mean, medical schools usually starts in July or August anyway. So if you're applying for the September board, that means you're probably already in your first few weeks of school, if not orientation.
Okay. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I noticed there I noticed this session is recording. So where would I be able to see this recording?
I can definitely send it to you if you're interested. All you got to do is drop a. Are you able to get into the chat?
No. No,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So just stay on at the end, and I'll get your email address, or you can go ahead and email me or shoot me a text
Okay.
at this slide here.
So this
Sir,
video
sir.
will be, I will be sending out this
sorry,
video
Kim.
to all the student advisors that we sent out the poster to. Also, if you want it personally sent to you, just email Sergeant First Class Sim on his email, and we can personally send it to you once the video is edited with all the beginning parts where it's not part of the brief.
Hey, Sergeant Kim, really quick too. I just want to mention because he was asking about the scholarship number. So to kind of give you a little more clarity. So for this year, for example, we had the Army as a whole had 290 4-year HPSP scholarships, but only 35 3-year scholarships. So when Dr. Flick was talking about, you want to apply early because if you wait, so what tends to happen is some people will wait until they've already started their first year and they think, hey, now I want to do the HPSP. So, let me go ahead and apply. The issue that you run into is that number for the 3-year scholarship is drastically lower than the 4-year scholarship. So it's a lot more competitive, basically. And then to touch on the other services, because you was asking, so yes, just like Sergeant Sim said, Air Force, Navy, also have the HPSP. However, their criteria and their application process can slightly differ. And one thing that I would just tell you to take the time to research on your own uh, is a big thing with that we talk about with the Army. We have 7 like large MTFs throughout the United States, so we have the flexibility to allow people to go and practice once they finish residency, where they want to in the country. Look at the Air Force and the Navy, like MTF locations, and that will give you an idea, at least when you're starting to consider, hey, where do I want to go after I finish residency? Like that will give you a good idea of if that service has a location in the area that you would like to be. And I think that's, one of the bigger concern that a lot of individuals who are applying have. So I would just, like I said, research it on your own and see which service you think would best benefit you.
Thank you, sir.
What location are you at, Taeyong?
Right now I'm in Florida.
Okay. How'd you hear about the brief?
So I heard about the brief from a recruiter from the Army as I applied last cycle, but I got waitlisted for medical schools. No, DO schools, I mean. So I'm trying to apply this application cycle with the HPSP scholarship.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just curious. Thanks for your questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Does anybody else wanna ask any questions before we wrap this up? Okay, yeah. So you have my email, telephone number. Doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. I'll email you the slides and the recording. So yeah, so you reach out, tell your friends. If you are in like Young in Florida will ensure that your local recruiter are able to help you with as you go through this process. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining. This is our first virtual brief with Dr. Flick, and if you are local, if you are in the area, we have a face-to-face presentation where we're going to fly Dr. Flick out from Denver, Colorado to UH Manoa, and that should be happening this fall potentially. We're going to try to get that together. So if you're able to come out here, just go ahead and reserve with us. Just contact me if you have any other questions. Young, hit me up if you have any more questions. Otherwise, yeah, good luck. Good luck to everybody. Thank you very much. So before I end off, are there any other questions?
No questions.
All right, well, that concludes the brief. Everyone have a good night. Young, it's late over there, man. Appreciate you joining.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll email you later for the recording.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
Have a good night. Bye, everybody.